It's the best business in the world. And I mean that with all of my heart and soul and spirit. I'm the father of 4 children. And every time we put a food forest in the ground, it's basically like a landscaping business, but it's actually easier because our design team hands the food forest cooperative the blueprint. Then the co-op opens a blueprint and says, this plant goes here, this soil goes here, and we literally hand them on a silver platter. We also help people. It's like a franchise. We call it a cooperative because our contract is 2 pages instead of 330, which was the franchise document that I spent $250,000 on. I threw that whole pile of shit in the trash. We now have a 2-page document based on the voluntary exchange of value. And we do this. We market and we inspire, and we have all these different resources. So to be in the business of helping people grow food right now is, I think, one of the most important and valuable businesses in the world.
This is the Alden Report.
Today's episode is brought to you in part by Wicked Happy. The way you live your life depends on your outlook, and theirs is simple. Be wicked happy. Wicked Happy provides you with apparel to make you smile. So if you want to be wicked happy and you want to look wicked cool, then visit wickedhappy.com, and at checkout, enter in the code RADIO for an additional 15% off your entire order. Again, visit wickedhappy.com, apparel to make you smile.
This is the Alden Report.
Right. My name is Mike Alden. We are here in Blue Bay Studios. As always, I always say how excited I am for my guests, and I'm super excited for my guests for a couple different reasons. One, this guy's going to talk about growing food, right? Growing food in your own backyard. How can we do that? What if you live in like New York City? Is there a way to do that? What if you're in some other urban area where it's not possible? But this guy's life is pretty interesting. He's traveled all over the world. He's built a company that valued over $1 billion. And now he's helping people learn how to grow food. And I'm just kind of interested in it because if you've ever followed me on Instagram, which I hope you do, although we'll talk about my social media cleanse in a little bit, I chronicled my challenges in kind of my own gardening ventures and, fighting with gophers and squirrels and everything else in between. So I'm excited to have this guy on because it's interesting to me. So it's a little bit selfish. I don't know. I think you're going to find it interesting. He's an interesting guy. Please help me welcome Jim Gale. Jim, thanks so much for being here, brother.
Well, thank you for having me, Mike. And to everybody listening, I'm excited to share the ideas to all the world's biggest problems. And you might think that sounds overstated. It's not. It's not hypothetical. And it has been proven everywhere it's been done. It's a science of permaculture. It's an agricultural design science. Anybody can grow food. In fact, growing food is not a time liability. It's not a financial liability. It is a time asset and a financial asset. And we solve all the world's biggest problems.
All right, let's back up for a second before we get into this food growing stuff. Your background is interesting. You're an entrepreneur at heart. I believe you built a fairly successful mortgage business, right? It was valued or it's generating
Yeah, I did. I started in 3.5 years, went from scratch to 1.3 billion in revenue, 480 loan officers in 10 states. It was a lot of fun. It was a pretty good run.
All right, let's stop for a second. All right, because we have a lot of entrepreneurs, that's remarkable to go from zero to that. So let's talk about that for a second. What inspired you to do that? How did you get involved in the mortgage space? And when was that? Was that like before the 2008 crash? When was that?
It was. So it was 1999. I was living in Surfers Paradise, Australia. I was backpacking around the world, and I went to Bond University, and I spent about 4 months studying the world's greatest minds, the world's greatest teachers, Napoleon Hill.
You didn't talk to me, so I mean, you obviously didn't really. But anyway,
dude, I was studying your work for years. You just didn't know it.
Did you just say Napoleon Hill? I mean, this some people read the Bible. This is what I read almost every day. Go ahead.
Yeah, that is beautiful work right there. In fact, whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe it can achieve is something that I've meditated on a lot. And it's true. And this is, Napoleon Hill says it, it's fucking true, because this guy, he studied all the greatest minds in the history of the world, and he met with them and he picked their brains. And he said, whatever the mind of man, and I add, or woman, even man is meant to be mankind, can conceive and believe, it can achieve, right? So that's a big statement. That's almost a godly statement. Like, wait a minute, if I can conceive it and believe it, I can achieve it. Yes. So then the next question is, what can I conceive and believe? And that's when I wrote my goals, and I wrote down that I wanted to have $3 million in 3 years, starting from scratch. I had bartending experience and a teaching degree. And 3.5 years later, it was massive. And it's because when you create a vision and you feel your way, you experience your way into the reality of that vision, then it happens. The universe makes it happen, right? It's just a matter of getting out of the programs and listening to the guidance.
It's interesting, man. I didn't know you had, an affinity to Napoleon Hill like I do. A lot of people talk about Think and Grow Rich. So I have an interesting story for you. So the original manuscript, the first what they call galley copies or advanced readers copies of the Law of Success, I was a part of a group. We actually purchased it, and when we purchased it, we had it authenticated, and we reached out to the Napoleon Hill Foundation. They had heard of these, but they themselves didn't even have one, and we purchased it and we had it. And so we got the unabridged first edition of the Law of Success. At the time, it was in 15 lessons. There were 15 individual leather bound, because this is in like 1915, I think it was. There were leather bound versions of each Law of Success, man, and it was so cool. So we had them authenticated. They were in fact the real deal. And then we've done some pretty big things.
That's fantastic,
dude. It was so cool to see. In fact, he wrote a little inscription to somebody. He was in Ohio at the time when he did it. I know we're going to talk about, what you're doing right now, foodforestabundance.com, and how you're teaching people, how to really kind of sustain life. So it's really interesting what you said. That book, there's a couple that changed my life, but that book changed my life. People talk about Think and Grow Rich. I'm talking about the Law of Success. He's got a bunch of other publications, but talk about, again, just elaborate a little bit more on the power of that book.
Oh, and Outwitting the Devil, right? I mean, sure. What is the devil?
Golden rule. I mean, we can go on and on.
It's on and on. It's the opposite of lived, right? I mean, that's why this. So so what I realized, right? when I saw clearly with my real eyes, my spirit eyes, what the truth of the world is, I started going down this rabbit hole, and I had sold the mortgage company, lived on the ocean for a year on my boat. And then I found Costa Rica, and I started studying what was happening. I started studying the problem. And when you're studying the problem, it sucks, because you're focused on the fucking problem. Problems suck. But to get to the solution, it's important that you understand the problem thoroughly. And so that's what I spent basically 2 years, 12 hours a day, all day long, studying and being very skeptical about what I was learning. In fact, I was going through cognitive dissonance because when I first heard the problem, that's not true. There's no way that could be true. At the time, I didn't understand compartmentalization and mind control and neurolinguistics and all this stuff. So my point is, once I fully got the problem, and the problem is governed mente. The problem is programs. The problem is mind control. The problems is belief systems that we adopt as our own that do not serve us. And when we can see those belief systems and we can start shedding those like layers of the onion, right? There's some tears involved, but when you can start shedding the programming and the mind control, govern is to manage and control, and mente is mind, then you can see clearly, which then you can relax your mind, take a deep breath, and then the messages will come. The ideas from source will come. And that's when you take inspired action, and anything is possible.
I just got my 20 minutes of TMN before you and I went live. So yeah, man, it's really interesting. I know we could talk forever about that, and I'm fired up about it, because there are a few things that I really kind of scream from the rooftops about. One is actually TM we talked about, but the Law of Success, truly changed my life. And you talk about too some of the things, even in that book. He was talking about radio frequencies in the early 1900s and how your thoughts truly, when they leave, they actually go somewhere, right? That's that whole thing of like, hey man, Like, I was just thinking about you. Then you called me. Well, yeah, because I truly put it out in the atmosphere. And it sounds so trippy and weird and just not real. But back to kind of what you're saying, if you believe it and if you can actually get your mindset, in that right frame, the shit works, man. Like, it's real stuff. Like, this is not hocus pocus. The whole law of attraction thing, everybody like that's real.
Absolutely, it's real. When Tesla, he said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And I believe that somebody manipulated that statement, right? The same people who program the minds of the slaves. What I believe he said is feel or experience in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, because thinking doesn't work in this way. Feeling the vibration, experiencing the connection with source and all that is infinitely more powerful. Just like creative questions are infinitely more powerful than affirmations, right? To say, I am this or that, whatever. Why am I this or that? When we ask a question, our brains are very much like computers. We're spirit playing a divine game, and that's our computer system, right? Our heart and our brain. Why am I this? How come I'm so good at this? Why am I, all that? When you ask that question, then your body filters it very differently, and it actually gives you an answer, right? So those are the things. And by the way, I do want to touch on TM and just meditation, because it's so freaking important.
Changed my life.
It's the most important thing, right? It's what Jesus went out in the desert and Buddha sat under a tree and all this. That's what it takes to get clear in the mind, to get enlightenmented or enlightened, is when you have a thought, and these are programs from other people usually, when they're in your head like this, there's no way to get an inspired idea through that mess. That's why meditation, which is simply, I'm always 1 or 2 breaths away from light mente. Go deep into the feeling of your hands, of your feet, of your stomach, of your heart, of your chest, of your throat. And all of a sudden, that's where the magic is. That's where the connection is.
Call that cosmic consciousness.
Yes.
We were on with Jim Gale. Man, I'm fired up already. I was fired up before I even knew his affinity for the law of success and Napoleon Hill and what he's done. I've talked a lot about it. If you'd like some more information about Jim, just go to, we haven't talked about it yet. We're going to go to foodforestabundance.com, foodforestabundance.com. And, right when you're looking on his website, and one of the questions he asks is, are you ready to live a more free, healthy, and abundant life? I think I am. I think we all want that type of stuff. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what he's doing right now. And it's interesting. His life is interesting. His story is interesting. And a lot of the things that he's probably learned was as a result of his world travels and how he's learned it from others as well. So again, if you'd like some more information, by the way, he gives out his email address right away, which I think is a little crazy. I told him not to do it, but that's all right. If you want to actually email him, you could just email Jim at foodforestabundance.com. Again, it's Jim at foodforestabundance.com. So let's jump into kind of what you're doing now. You built a massive organization. I could spend hours on picking your brain on how you did that, but you kind of touched on it. But and you've traveled all over the world. You've been to, I don't know, 40 countries or something like that. Are you in Costa Rica now?
No, I'm in Florida now. Okay. After 12 years in Costa Rica.
It's kind of a similar, depending on where you are in Florida, similar type of it. So you're in Costa Rica for a little while. So now you're really passionate about this food forest abundance thing. So I was, kind of joking, but also serious. I mean, I like to garden, or I did at least. And I just found first of all, there's a meditative part to that, right? But there's also the satisfaction of putting something in the soil, and then it comes up and you're able to eat it. And but actually, man, I tell you, I just have a really bad flashback of when I was growing this garden a couple of years ago during COVID, and I went out to look in my garden, and I thought I was hallucinating.
Oh.
Everything in my garden, everything was gone in overnight. And this fucker gopher, I had seen him trying to get in there, right? And some people are like, oh, you're gonna trap him, kill him, and all this other stuff. I'm like, you know what, man? he just wanted it more than I did. And I embraced it. I actually opened the gate and I was like, there was a little more left in there. I opened it up and I said, you know what, man, you can have it.
Man.
So let's talk about this though, because
Yeah.
I see these things of like, I see like urban gardens in my town. They have kind of community gardens where people can kind of, I don't know how that whole works, but I see people, I drive past it all the time. Let's talk about growing food, the importance of it. Why should we do it? Why are people doing it? And why is it important?
I'll go to the core of why it's important. Napoleon Hill said, Victor Hugo said, there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. He didn't say a new idea. He said an idea whose time has come. And that statement I know to be true, and it's so effing profound. What is the idea? That's been my obsession. What is the idea, and how do we get the masses to adopt the idea? Well, the idea is something everybody can describe in glorious detail. Everybody here listening knows of the idea, and you've been programmed to believe that the idea is a utopic fantasy, that it's not possible. Now, we might lose a couple people here, but stay with me for 1 second. The Garden of Eden, a place of radical abundance, not a place of religion, right? Legion is the Roman army. To religion is to join the Roman army. I'm not talking about that. That's another layer of mind control. I'm talking about a simple place where we use our resources wisely. There are 40 million acres of lawn in the United States alone. When we turn half that lawn, even less, but let's go for half. We turn half that lawn, like the edges of your yard, into perennial edible landscapes, not monocultures, right? But a diversity of crops that actually can be less maintenance than a lawn. Then we reverse mass extinction and deforestation and cancer and heart disease and diabetes and world hunger, and we end tyranny of all kinds. This is it. And we just save massive amounts of money and every other thing, right? So that's the solution. That is the idea whose time has come.
So somewhat of a utopianistic viewpoint, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And you tried to kind of steal the thunder of the naysayers from the beginning and saying, stay with me a little bit. So, when I think about what you just said, there's a lot of things that just kind of came to mind. But so if I wanted, let's just start with the basics. So I don't know, like I want to grow a garden. I'm in New England, which I am. Where do I got a little tiny plot of land. Maybe I'm living in a condo, whatever. Where do I start?
Well, so our target audience is the suburban backyard, because that's the lowest hanging fruit. That's zone 1 of our world, right? All these suburban lawns. Now, if you have a closet and you live in a condo or a little bit of counter space, you can grow microgreens. You can thank God for the cannabis industry, because they've shown us how to grow very, very effectively in closets, right? You go buy a $29 LED light at Home Depot, you put some flashy stuff on the wall for reflection, you get the temperature and the air right, a little fan in there, maybe a little essential oil diffuser to stop the mold, right? And you put those things in a closet and you can grow so many potatoes, so much cannabis, so many tomatoes, all this stuff. In fact, I learned that tomato nutrients are really a code word for cannabis nutrients. But the point is, that's one way to do it if you don't have a lawn. If you do have a lawn, then permaculture design is job 1. Now, permaculture is a sustainable agricultural design science developed by Bill Mollison and David Holmgren couple generations ago. And nothing I'm saying is hypothetical anymore. It's
first of all, what is that? What is permaculture? I don't even know what
permaculture means. Permanent culture. Okay. And it's a science whereby Bill and David, and then now millions of people around the world, observed nature. And they asked the question, what works? How do we, instead of putting a bunch of ornamentals out or a forest that is simply cypress or pine or oak or one of these things, how do we create a food forest where every tree, every plant, every bush, every root and tuber and all the way up is a functional plant that's good for habitat for people and animals and everything, right? So what they found by observing natural systems is that there are guilds or communities of plants that like each other. And in other words, they're supportive. You've got your nitrogen fixers, your chop and drop green manure plants, things like moringa, which put a taproot way down and they suck up incredible nutrients. It's called the miracle tree, the tree of life, the drumstick tree. And it'll bring the nutrients up into the tree and it'll drop leaves, and the leaves go on the ground and they build soil. The soil is like the immune system or the skin of the earth. And when the soil is healthy, then the plants are healthy. So it's really a soil building science, and out of that soil erupts incredible abundance.
Man, I was like, I didn't do a garden this year. Now I don't know. I feel like it's a little late now. I feel like I grew some tulips and I was really excited about them. So maybe, I don't know. I
plant some fruit trees.
Yeah.
Berry bushes. That's easy, because how much maintenance does a fruit tree take? Nothing. You just let it grow.
Well, I'm in Massachusetts though, so I don't know. I'm not gonna be able to grow any oranges here.
Okay, so my buddy's in northern Minnesota.
Yeah.
He's got 300 different species of edible and medicinal plants. They live off these plants. And he's got such an epic food forest. He started 5.5 years ago that he estimates tens of thousands of plants in the forest around his property that have been planted by the wind and the rain and the animals that have come into his food forest and brought seeds out into the jungle. A food forest by its very nature is abundant. It's expansive. So you can start right now planting perennials.
So, back up for a second. You built a big business. You said you sold it. That's, we're in a capitalistic world that we live in. Making money, you're generating an income, you're saving money, you're creating wealth. How is this benefiting you and your company? Are you just like, you know what, man, I'm here to save the world?
Well, so have you heard of John Nash, the Nash equilibrium?
Yes.
Okay, so he won the Nobel Prize, and the show A Beautiful Mind was done in honor of his life, although Hollywood totally screwed it up on purpose. And here's how. Before John Nash was Adam Smith. He was the founder of economic theory, like the head guy for 150 years. And his theory was, if everybody in a system, in an economy, does the best for themselves, then that will create a good economy. Nash came along and put his mathematical genius to this and said, wait a minute, if you do what's best for yourself and others, that is actually a better economy because it speaks to ethics. And so John Nash won the Nobel Prize for that. And what did Hollywood do? They spent 20 minutes talking about how he came up with this idea and the math behind it. And then they spent the rest of the time turning him into a schizophrenic. And really, the show was about schizophrenia instead of the most incredible idea ever and the simplest. So everything is selfish. There's no such thing as not selfish. Every single thing we do is because we think we are going to feel better in the doing of it. Right. So love is the ultimate selfishness. Serving is the ultimate selfishness when we do so with joy and love. So I'm loving the process of changing the world.
I'm loving that you're doing it as well. It's, I can just, if you're watching right now, you can see the passion. If you're listening, you can obviously hear the passion of Jim as well. If you'd like some more information about what Jim is doing in Food Forest, go to foodforestabundance.com. He's given out his email as well. You want to reach out to him directly. You could just email him, jim@foodforestabundance.com.
Today's episode is brought to you in part by Wicked Happy. The way you live your life depends on your outlook, and theirs is simple. Be wicked happy. Wicked Happy provides you with apparel to make you smile. So if you want to be wicked happy and you want to look wicked cool, then visit wickedhappy.com, and at checkout, enter in the code RADIO for an additional 15% off your entire order. Again, visit wickedhappy.com, apparel to make you smile.
All right, when I think of gardening here again in New England, it's kind of a pastime. It's something that a lot of times like the families do or cultures do. But you're talking about gardening to change the world, to end tyranny was one of the things that you said, which again, I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist, right? So how do you get people to do this other than what we're doing right now? Like, how do you really convince people in New York City to grow upside down tomato plants from their, from the fire escape or whatever? How does it? I mean, like
We show them the why, right?
okay.
The layers and
Yeah,
layers
but the
and
people,
layers.
but the thing is that people don't fucking care about other people. I know I know that we say that they do, but they really don't.
Right.
So like, I'm gonna grow a garden in order to help like people I don't know. It just doesn't. It doesn't seem fucking real to me.
It has to start with self. That's
Right.
why John Nash Equilibrium is so
Right.
right on. Do
Right.
what's good for you,
Right.
right? So I've got, like we planted about, I don't know, 800 or 900 fruiting and medicinal plants in the last 12 months at a community. We're building an off-grid community in Central Florida on a private lake with a runway to demonstrate freedom. We're building a studio on the property to demonstrate. It's already sold out. Everything's sold out there. But what we're showing people, in fact, there's woods everywhere. It's at the end of the road. It's just nature abounds, pigs and deers and cats and all sorts of stuff. And we've got hundreds of different species of edibles growing all over the place. And the animals will come in, like a moth will lay some eggs and the larva then will eat a particular plant, right? But there's not a monoculture. Monocultures are when you've got one species of plant. You put a couple moths in there and they will that's how plagues are created with monocultures. When you have diversity, then the moth likes that particular plant and maybe that one over there, maybe that one over there. Out of 40 or 50 plants, they might like 3 or 4 or 5. Well, that gives time for the predators, the wasps and the spiders and the geckos and the chameleons to come in and balance out the system. And that's the beauty of it. And that's why you're in a place where you've got gophers, but there might not be any apex predators, right? You need hawks and cats, right? Balance is the key to the success of our world. And diversity is the key to balance. So when we design a food forest for somebody's backyard, it's not 1 or 2 or 3 different types of plants. It's 30 or 40 different types of plants.
So when I think about the moths, and I also think, I think of how I had all these bugs, destroying my garden and eating the leaves and slugs and everything else that I was battling with. And I tried to, I did the whole, if you had put beer in my garden, so the slugs would go in but they just never stopped coming. And then I had some sort of species of bugs that were eating the leaves and beetles and everything else. And I was trying to do everything with organic, quote, pesticides. Like, how do you have balance, right? But when you do have these, quote, predators or what have you, or these gophers that are fucking things up, like, how do you have that balance and create food that's helping people? How do you have both?
One of my favorite quotes of all time, Bill Mollison said, "You don't have a slug problem, you got a duck deficiency." Right? So
a what deficiency?
A duck deficiency.
Okay.
One duck or a chicken will absolutely heal your garden. Now, and think about this, like chickens are one of the most, and ducks, they're some of the most incredible tools for a food forest. If you leave them in a garden too long, they'll start by eating all the bugs and ticks and slugs and all that stuff. And then they'll go eat the rest of your garden. But that's why if you rotationally graze them, where you put them in one spot for a certain amount of time and see how long that takes, they'll eat all the pests, right? Some people buy praying mantises or ladybugs and put them in their gardens, right? Some people can't do that. But in other words, there's a natural solution to every problem that's actually a benefit, not a liability, whereas poisons are a massive liability. When we add ducks, now you've got ducks and duck eggs, or chickens and chicken eggs and feathers and heat for your greenhouse and all these different solutions.
See, I just went and peed all around my garden because I thought that was supposed to help.
It'll help the nitrogen.
My neighbors didn't really appreciate me walking around pissing all around my garden. Actually, no, they couldn't see me. But all right, people listening right now, they're like, this sounds kind of interesting. I like this idea. They go to foodforestabundance.com. Do you have like a starter kit, so to speak? Like, for me, I love, cucumbers and peppers, and that's what I was growing, and carrots and even corn. Like, those are the things, green beans, snap peas. Those are the things that I kind of like. Strawberries. But is there like a kit, so to speak? You'd mentioned the cannabis industry. You go to, these grow houses or what have you, and you can buy a kit. You can buy the whole thing, the tent, the lights, the seeds, everything. So if someone were to go to foodforestabundance.com, can they get that there, or how does that work?
So I want to make a distinction between two different types of growing. There's annual growing and there's perennials. Right? Okay. Annuals are plants that you plant once and then you harvest, you take the seeds out, and then you plant again. Right? They take a little more effort, although they're still incredibly valuable, and we need them right now, especially with the short-term food supply chain disaster that's happening. Perennials are plants that you plant once and they will last for generations. There's an olive tree on the Greek Isle of Crete that's been producing olives for over 2,000 years. One tree. That's a perennial. So now imagine a perennial food.
Shouldn't they be named the opposite, though? Shouldn't they be named annuals? Because I get confused, right?
Yeah.
I mean, annuals come up. I don't know.
Yeah, annuals are once a year.
Perennials, you know what? That's what I want to do. I'm going to put that in the ecosystem. I'm going to change the name of these fucking things because I get. There you go. All right. Okay. All right.
I love it.
Okay. All right.
So perennial food forests are my favorite thing because it's the Garden of Eden. You walk outside and there's literally just food growing everywhere. I can walk out at Calcite any time of year and I can get a meal. Anybody, our whole community can have a free meal, which is a major time and financial resource. Like one peach tree or one apple tree where you are, you put that in the ground, within 3 or 4 years, you've got 100% ROI. And then every year after that, you're getting over 100%. Now you put a guild, which maybe it's 3 or 4 different berry bushes, raspberries and blueberries and blackberries and turmeric and ginger and sweet potatoes and potatoes, all in that same area, and nitrogen fixers, a lot of beans. Now you've got a 500 or 600% ROI by year 3 and every year after that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting way to look at that. But back to my other question, like, is there again, so I'm a newbie. I don't know how to garden. Again, I'm living in New York City or I'm living in some sort of urban area. I don't have a plot of land, but maybe I have a small little, I don't know, deck, or maybe I'm just, I don't know, maybe a windowsill. What should people start with, or is it kind of all over the place?
Well, no, it's very specific. Everything starts with design. When we're building a house or anything that is structured and takes some thought, you have to get the architecture right first. So the design process, if somebody says, I would like to turn my yard into a food forest, then we meet with a designer. We've got 45 designers all over the world that it's their job to design food forests according to the zone and the customer's needs and the property needs. So that's the first step, and it's an incredible process. Once the design is done, it's a 45-page document with all sorts of details, including a custom plan. Then it goes to the customer. They can either DIY their design, or they can hire one of our food forest cooperatives, which is the fastest growing cooperative in the world probably right now. We're all over the world helping people grow food. If you have a deck or if you have a closet, the best thing to do on that is go to YouTube and look up the very specific thing that you'd like to do. We don't typically design indoor spaces because really we're looking at permaculture, building soil more than indoors, but we do have an incredible team that will help and guide people through the process.
In a second, I want to talk to you about the impact on one's health as it relates to growing their own food and consuming their own food in a second. Listen, we're on with Jim Gale. If you're not inspired, or at least interested or intrigued in what he's talking about, I don't know, maybe you're listening to the wrong podcast or watching the wrong podcast. This guy is obviously passionate. He's dedicated his life, and again, a pretty grandiose plan to really change the world and change impact and end tyranny, which again, I'm going to grill him on that a little bit more. It's really, really interesting what he's doing. So if you'd like some more information about Jim, go to foodforestabundance.com. He gives out his email. It's simple, Jim@foodforestabundance.com. If you want some more information about what they're doing. When you do go to the website, there are some blueprints there. So there are some things they talk a little bit about their services, but it's pretty interesting on what he's doing. He truly is having an impact on the world. I do want to also talk to him a little bit about the oceans as well and how people are doing this in the ocean in just a minute. So again, if you'd like some more information, go to foodforestabundance.com. All right. So I did say I want to talk to you about one's own kind of personal health, how that has an impact on it. But Before I do that, let's talk about the oceans. You had mentioned the tree. I think it was the tree of life. I think that's what you called it. When you think of kelp, right, or seaweed, they say that seaweed, grows 10 times faster than any land plant. That it's more minerally dense than any land plant. Is this going on within the oceans as well? And also, and the reason why I ask is I was watching a documentary about it. About how people are doing, something similar in the ocean, but more for a environmental standpoint, where the kelp is actually absorbing toxins and consuming the toxins, and essentially then through photosynthesis, then just basically just emitting it into the air. So what's going on in the oceans?
Well, I tell you, we're working with a new development in Nicaragua right now, not far out of San Juan del Sur, in which they are actually putting all sorts of systems in the oceans right outside the front of their community to grow kelp, to grow oysters, to grow all of these things in a way that's incredibly sustainable and regenerative, right? Because our current practices of monocultures and poisons, they're destroying our world. They're mining the soil in such a way that even the UN, which is a criminal organization, says that we only have 60 years left of soil. Now, I wouldn't believe anything they said, except for the permaculturalists and the farmers are saying the same thing. So my point is everything we're talking about with diversity builds that system. And the same thing goes for the oceans. Now, I'm not a specialist in ocean permaculture, but we have specialists that love that stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, what's going on in the ocean as well. All right, so let's talk now about. So I'm growing my own garden. Depending on the quote chemicals that I'm using, I'm guessing it's fairly organic. The organic thing drives me a little crazy too. I remember when I went to a strawberry field with my daughter, and we were, I have a beautiful picture of her, and we were picking the strawberries, and it's a quote a organic farm, and I said, is it truly organic? They said, yeah, but we do use pesticides. Well, how could it be organic? They said, well, we don't spray the strawberries. We just spray the leaves. so they're fucking kind of organic.
Oh, God. The same guy who was the head of the freaking FDA or Monsanto is now the head of the FDA organic division. And he's been back and forth like 3 times.
Yeah. You're talking about the seed company.
Yeah, yes, the whole thing is just a scam. Organic, you shouldn't have to declare when something isn't grown with poisons. You should have to declare when something is grown with poisons. Jane Goodall said, we're going to look back on this dark era of agriculture and shake our heads. How could we have ever thought it was a good idea to use poisons to grow food? She's a smart lady.
Yeah, it's just a little bit though. It's okay, just a little bit. I say to people, people say, well, there's just a little bit. I say, well, if just a little bit, I say, well, I'm just going to put a little bit of my urine on your salad, and then you tell me how you feel about it.
Yeah, it's coming at us from every direction. We'll know when we've won the war, when there are no more poisons in our air, in our water, and in our soil, and in our minds through mass media bullshit.
So talk about the benefits of truly eating, organic and its relation to health and global health. And when you talked a little bit about, again, ending, tyranny and things like that. I mean, I see where you're going with it. I get, I'm picking up what you're putting down, but I grow a garden. I start eating from my own garden. I'm eating whatever vegetables now. I'm not buying it from the store. So I'm saving money, feel good about it. But tell me about like the benefits on my physiology as well.
Yeah. Well, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, the 3 big killers, I think after doctor prescriptions, which I think number 1 or 2, they're a result of the foods we eat and the toxins we ingest. So the difference between eating things that are poisonous and not poisonous, one is nourishing. Food is supposed to be nourishment that brings and adds life and builds stability in the body. What they're selling at the grocery store is poison, right? So the difference is either life or death. It's either a shorter life or a longer life. It's either a more vibrant life or a less vibrant life.
It's a pretty powerful statement. I mean, so if I go into Whole Foods though, and I'm picking up quote organic vegetables, I mean, shouldn't I feel good about it?
I don't know. Is that guy trustworthy? Is a guy who runs these entities? I mean, if they spent 10% of their net worth to do good in the world, to put food forests in all public lands and parks, all over the world as demonstration sites, they would change the world radically in no time. Like in just a few years, we would go from death and scarcity and dying to absolute abundance in life. So I don't trust them at all. And I think there's a lot of facts that back me up on that.
What about like roots, like beets and other, like, because I hear about these gardens, and you can have them year round up here where they grow like in darkness, and they can do it outside. What are they? I mean, I don't even know what they're called. Are they called root gardens? Or is that what they're called? You know what I'm talking about? Like,
They're
potatoes
one.
and things,
They're one layer. In fact, sweet potatoes and potatoes, everybody should be growing some. You can grow them in a 5-gallon bucket with an LED light and a little fan. You can start growing sweet potatoes. And I mean, think about this. You put a little thing in there, a little start in there, and all of a sudden your soil turns into food. If that's not freaking miraculous, then I don't know what is, right? But there's a food supply chain disaster that is in process right now. And everybody's going to know it by the fall, everybody in the world, if you don't already. So potatoes and roots and tubers are just one layer of a food forest. So they start underground with the roots and tubers. Then the ground layer is the herbaceous layer, a lot of mushrooms and herbs. And then you got your shorter fruit trees or bushes and stuff, your taller bushes, and then your shorter fruit trees and your overstories, and then vines, right? Those are the 7 basic layers of a food forest. So when we design all the layers in one spot.
What's your take on hydroponics and growing that way? For those who, again, there is no possibility for them. They're just the environment that they're living. There is no soil. They're in an urban environment. Is growing stuff through hydroponics a good solution?
It's awesome. I've grown so much. I've created so many hydroponic systems. In fact, we're going to market in China with some here very soon with a whole array of them. It's great. If you have that particular situation, if you're in a condo or an apartment, or you don't have land and you want to start growing some food, have an extra battery source for that in case the power grid goes down, because a lot of times you turn off your pump and you're done. You don't water your systems anymore. So to have redundancy and backups is very important, especially now. But yes, those tower systems and all sorts of different hydroponic systems, they're very effective.
What about the impact of growing these plants? I don't know the kind of the biology of it, but as it relates to producing things like oxygen and nitrogen, you'd mentioned earlier, on the environment as a whole as well. So growing these gardens, okay, yeah, we're going to consume them, we're going to eat them, so there's going to be less shipping, less gas, less all that other stuff. But what about like the benefits to the environment, just in general? Because again, I'd mentioned, kelp and seaweed, how that takes up, toxins from the ocean. Talk about the benefits there.
Like hemp and cannabis, it takes radioactivity out of the soil. One of my favorite guys, Joel Salatin, who I've become friends with now, he is known as America's most famous farmer. And he has shown, he's taken his farm and he rotates animals, because they're all saying that the world's going to die in because of cow farts and pig farts and all that stupid shit. He has proven.
I thought Al Gore fixed that problem by putting bags over their asses.
There you go. We could turn that into fuel, right? So Joel Salatin has actually shown that he can massively reduce this bullshit narrative of carbon footprint and shit, and build soil at the same time by using strategic rotational grazing. So he has his cows come in and they eat the grass, and grass grows fast, and it's also carbon sequestration. Again, I'm not saying that narrative is true. It's a control narrative. However, we solve that too, right? So even the Democrats could come aboard on this one. So the cows come by and they eat the grass. Then the chickens come by and they eat the bugs and all the different things. And now he's got way more profit per acre, and he's building soil and building life instead of the opposite.
What is your take on meat and poultry as it relates to sustaining life as a human being? I don't even know. Are you vegetarian, or should people be vegetarian? I tried it before. Just my body type just doesn't make sense for me.
Yeah, I tried it too, and I don't feel the same. Now there have been a lot of people who went that way and love it. A lot of people I know who went that way and come back from it. But here's what I know for certain. In a permaculture system, diversity is the strength of the system, and diversity includes animals, right? And so if you don't have balance, which means an apex predator, then your system is going to fail. The goats that went all over the Middle East, and the sheep, like little maggots, they ate everything. Desertification can be caused by animals. That's why balance is so important, right? The balance is the key to life and diversity.
All right, I got one last question. I keep saying one last question, but okay. So, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think it's important for people. But let's say people, for whatever reason, they just can't do this. They go to foodforestabundance.com. They agree with it. They, for whatever reason, they can't, they won't, they're unwilling to. But they're like, hey, I'll eat vegetables or what have you. What do those people do? Like when they go into a place that like Whole Foods or these other grocery stores, or should they go to the farmer's market rather? Where should they go? Wow. And then on top of that, so let's say they don't even have a farmer's market, but they're buying from a big box retailer. What are some of the things they should avoid and some of the things they should do to kind of reduce the chances of them maybe getting sick from the stuff that they're eating?
Yeah. So first of all, avoid all foods grown with poisons, and avoid all GMOs because they're grown with poisons and they don't have seeds. And that's promoting this idea that growing food that doesn't provide a crop next year it's insane, right? But it's a good control mechanism for humanity. Kissinger said, if you want to control people, control food. That wasn't the ramblings of some random guy. That was the guy who's head of the Council of Foreign Relations, whose strategy it was to meet with every US president and tell them how they were going to treat the agricultural system. So the people, like, let's say somebody's either on an incredibly tight budget or they just love DIYing. Go to YouTube, and I hate these control mechanisms, but there's a lot of good stuff on there. Go in and type in your zone, your area. What should I grow at this time of year? How do I propagate seeds? You can literally go to Whole Foods and you can buy organic fruits and veggies. You can take the seeds out of the tomatoes and cucumbers and apples and peaches and all that. And you can go to YouTube and say, how do I start my own garden with these seeds? And with $20, you can actually eat the food, save some of the seeds, and you can start your own garden.
That's it, man. You know what? Look, I wasn't going to do a garden this year, but I think I'm going to have to now. You've inspired me to do it. I mean, my tulips were beautiful. I was really excited about them, and they didn't get eaten by any rodents or critters or anything. But man, I tell you, I think it's beautiful what you're doing. You've built the big business and continue to do stuff, and I really think it's admirable what you're doing. And I'm so happy that you spent some time with us today, Jim. So people listening right now or watching right now, they're kind of interested. You touched upon it earlier. You're saying how it's this co-op industry is just aggressively growing. It's a very fast growing business. So if someone's listening right now, they want to get involved. They want to, they want to make money doing it. Can someone make money doing this?
It's the best business in the world. And I mean that with all of my heart and soul and spirit. I'm the father of 4 children. And every time we put a food forest in the ground, it's basically like a landscaping business, but it's actually easier because our design team hands the food forest cooperative the blueprint. Then the co-op opens a blueprint and says, this plant goes here, this soil goes here, and we literally hand them on a silver platter. We also help people. It's like a franchise. We call it a cooperative because our contract is 2 pages instead of 330, which was the franchise document that I spent $250,000 on. I threw that whole pile of shit in the trash. We now have a 2-page document based on the voluntary exchange of value. And we do this. We market and we inspire, and we have all these different resources. So to be in the business of helping people grow food right now is, I think, one of the most important and valuable businesses in the world.
So if somebody goes to foodforestabundance.com, they can learn about how they can essentially, again, we're not going to call it a franchise, but
co-op,
a co-op owner or what have you. You give them all the tools and all the resources. Is there any sort of certification? Like, what if I don't know about this stuff? I'm interested. But
yes, there's training, there's certification, there's many layers. We've got 20 people on our full-time staff, and we've got 45 designers, 140 co-ops around the world, and 700 abundance ambassadors, all in 13 months, from 0 to this big in 13 months. And we're going to 10X in the next 12 months.
Listen, if you like some more information about Jim and what he's doing, go to foodforestabundance.com. Again, it's foodforestabundance.com. I believe he's giving you, right on his website, he has a blueprint. I like that with my book, Blueprint to Business. So he's giving you a blueprint on what to do, how to do it. And you know what? You should pay attention to this stuff. He kind of touched upon it briefly and said, we're in for a reckoning. Like we're gonna be in a really difficult spot at some point. And if you're not prepared, I talk about this all the time. If you're not prepared, might be too late by the time you realize what you need to do. So you know what? Look, go to YouTube, like you said. If you go to foodforestabundance.com, but you go to YouTube and just learn about this stuff, right? You can just Google him, Jim Gale, as well. You can see some of the other things that he's talked about, or you just go back and listen to this again. And also you can forward this to your friends, relatives, and neighbors and post this on social media so that we can, in fact, have an impact on the world. Listen, as always, I always say how excited I am to have people on the podcast that are having a positive impact on the world, that are trying to change the world, that are doing real things, real people doing real things. My name is Mike Alden. That's Jim Gale, and we'll see you soon.
Today's episode is brought to you in part by Wicked Happy. The way you live your life depends on your outlook, and theirs is simple. Be wicked happy. Wicked Happy provides you with apparel to make you smile. So if you want to be wicked happy and you want to look wicked cool, then visit wickedhappy.com, and at checkout, enter in the code RADIO for an additional 15% off your entire order. Again, visit wickedhappy.com, apparel to make you smile.